There's a moment in the day when the world seems to finally fall silent. Something inside you, a moment so simple that it goes unnoticed by almost everyone, but which Napoleon Hill described as the threshold where man finds his own seat of greatness. He said this with the conviction of someone who spent decades studying extraordinary minds. Perhaps that's why his words carry an almost prophetic weight. For Hill, there was nothing more dangerous, and at the same time more powerful than what a person allows to occupy their last thoughts before falling. Because, according to him, this moment ignored by the vast majority is what separates those who create their own, those who merely repeat what the world. And if you really stop to think about it, isn't it unsettling to realize that someone's destiny might be being shaped precisely the moment they believe they are disconnecting from life? Hill deeply believed that every human being possesses an invisible workshop within themselves, and that the subconscious is the constant craftsman working tirelessly there. He said that it doesn't matter if you are conscious or not. Your mind continues to obey the instructions it receives. And that is precisely what makes this interval between wakefulness and sleep so critical. For Hill, it is at this moment that the conscious mind relaxes its rational vigilance, allowing what you think or feel to pass directly to the deepest core of the mind. There is no filter. There is no internal debate. There is no questioning. There is only acceptance. And this acceptance, according to him, defines everything you will be able to experience in the outside world. But here arises an uncomfortable, almost cruel question. If this moment is so decisive, why do most people waste it? Hill had his answer. He realized that the poor are not just poor in money, but poor in vision, in mental discipline, inner belief, generally surrender their last thoughts to chaos. They go to bed consumed by frustrations, fear of not being able to bills, by unresolved grievances, by destructive comparisons, by silent self-punishments. They take the worst of themselves to bed. And that is precisely what the subconscious truth. The mind accepts it. The mind replicates it. The mind produces it. Meanwhile, those whom Hill called conscious creators do the exact opposite. They don't let chance command their minds in that instant. They protect that moment like a temple. They guard it like a portal. They use it as a tool. For them, that brief period before sleep is not rest. It is construction. It is decision. It is the act of planting in the dark that which will flourish in the light. They direct their thoughts with the precision of someone who knows that each mental image is West. Each emotion felt is an signature. Each intention is a mold. And Hill said that this is not empty mysticism. It is psychological discipline. It is understanding that the subconscious is a faithful but blind servant. It accomplishes everything it receives, including that which harms you, if that is what. Now, imagine the impact of this when we think about real life. How many people go to bed believing they are incapable? How many mentally replay the day's failures? How many review painful dialogues thinking about what should have said? How many lie down fearing tomorrow? How many fall asleep immersed in a feeling of inadequacy? And the most difficult question of all, how many realize that they are transforming these thoughts into instructions? Hill insisted that every emotionally charged thought is an order sent to the subconscious. And if this is true, and he argued that it is, then how many destinies are being destined for failure simply because the person doesn't know what they are doing with their own thoughts at the most vulnerable moment? This is where Hill's teaching becomes almost disturbing. He said that everything that is repeated every night silently, emotional force, ends up taking shape in the physical world. Not because the universe magically conspires, but because the subconscious begins to mold your perception, your behavior, your choices, your energy, and your ability to act toward what he called this the law of the materialization of faith. And faith, for Hill, is not religious belief. It is the inner feeling of certainty. Certainty that is born not from conscious thought, from emotional repetition in the subconscious. This certainty you build for yourself when no one is watching. But then another inevitable dilemma. If it's so simple, why isn't it widely taught? Hill said the answer is brutally simple, because it's too easy. And what is too easy is usually ignored. Humanity seeks complication. It seeks grandiose rituals. It seeks elaborate theories. It seeks fantastical formulas. But Hill knew that the human mind operates through simple, invisible, silent laws. Precisely because they are silent, most people don't pay attention to them. Compare this to the force of gravity. You don't see it, but it continues to operate. Ignoring it doesn't make it any less real. Same is true of the subconscious. You don't need to believe in it for it to be shaping your life. Impossible to read Hill's observations and not feel a kind of inner unease. Because if all of this is true, then we ourselves are responsible for far more than we are. We are authors of chapters we don't even realize we are gardeners planting seeds we didn't even know we were holding. We are architects drawing in the dark the building where they will. And this realization, however profound, can be liberating or devastating. It depends on what you do with it. Hill didn't say this to scare people, to awaken them. He believed that if a person understood the value of that moment before sleep, they would never go to bed the same way again. They would never again allow random thoughts to take over their mind. They would never again emotionally surrender to memories that they would never again sleep like someone defeated. He said that the night is the field where tomorrow is cultivated. A simple phrase, but one that carries a power that few understand. And now, perhaps you're beginning to understand why this practice is kept secret among the rich and visionaries. Why it's taught only in restricted circles, passed from mentor to disciple, from master to apprentice. Because, for Hill, true luxury lay not in what a man possessed, but in what he knew. In mastery over his own, in understanding that sacred moment before sleep, and the power to command images, sensations, and intentions with absolute clarity. And so we begin to approach the central truth of this teaching. The question that remains vibrating in the air is if you could change your life simply by changing what you think before you go to sleep, would you be willing to try? Or would you continue surrendering to the automatic routine that shapes entire destinies without the person even realizing? He'll believe that the answer to this question defines who flourishes, who remains stuck. And that's precisely why this is only the first part of the journey. The rest, the profound revelation about how this ritual works and how it transforms lives, is yet. Because, according to Hill, it is the moment you understand this principle that true inner construction begins. And what begins within, sooner or later appears outside. Napoleon Hill used to say that when the mind falls asleep, the inner world awakens with a force that few people understand. For him, the subconscious doesn't just work while you rest. It operates as a silent and diligent second self, continuing to build your reality based on what you give it before closing your eyes. And that's why this moment is so dangerous for those who live on autopilot. Because what you think at that moment doesn't disappear with sleep. On the contrary, it descends deep into a space where nothing is questioned and everything is accepted as absolute. Few people stop to reflect on this. Perhaps that's why the night revealed who truly dominated their own. If you observe carefully, you'll realize that what Hill describes is present in common everyday situations. Think, for example, about how you wake up after a day spent worrying. You wake up with a heavy chest, somewhat directionless, with a scrambled mind, as if something was already wrong before it even began. Everything seems more difficult, slower, more distant. Now compare that to the day you went to bed after an achievement, even a small one. Compliment received, task completed, a goal achieved. You wake up different. The world hasn't changed, but you have. And he'll believe that this is not a coincidence. It's a response from the subconscious to the instructions it received before falling asleep. He claimed that the subconscious absorbs emotions with far greater intensity than words. This means that you can rationally say you believe in something. But if the dominant emotion before sleep is fear, insecurity, or defeat, the subconscious will register this truth. And over time, these silent truths transform into behaviors, choices, and inevitably, results. It's as if you plant seeds every day without realizing it. The subconscious doesn't ask if you truly want it. It simply makes what you emotionally give grow. Hill used to tell stories of people who changed their lives based on this simple understanding. One of them was about a young salesman who kept failing. He studied techniques, repeated motivational phrases, woke up early, worked hard. Nothing changed. Every night he went to bed exhausted, feeling defeated before even trying again. It was only when he understood this concept, something inside him transformed. Before going to sleep, he began to visualize himself closing sales, smiling at clients, being recognized. At first it seemed ridiculous, but after a few weeks he began differently with that. He spoke with more confidence, looked people in the eye, and positioned himself more firmly. And as a consequence, life reacted. Hill said that this man didn't change the world. He changed himself, and the world merely reflected it. And how many times have you experienced this without naming the phenomenon? How many nights have you gone to sleep with a bad feeling because of a comment, a debt, a silly mistake, and the next day woke up with everything feeling too heavy? How many times have you lain down in silence thinking you wanted to change your life, felt paralyzed the moment you closed your eyes? Hill believed that this feeling is not weakness, it's programming. The subconscious, fueled by negative emotion, creates an internal resistance that accompanies you throughout the day. Not out of malice, but out of obedience. It's interesting to note that the rich, as called those who master their own minds, do something completely different in ordinary situations. They also go through difficulties, face problems, feel fear. The difference lies in what they do with it while many go to bed reliving the worst moment of the day, they consciously choose what to give to their subconscious. Some write down goals, others visualize specific scenes. Others breathe deeply until they reach a neutral or elevated emotional state. The method doesn't matter. The intention matters. What matters is the emotional command the mind receives at the last instant. He'll describe this as teaching the subconscious to work for you, not against you. According to him, the mistake most people make is thinking that the subconscious has a preference for thoughts. That's not true. It simply responds intensely to what is emotionally impactful. And since people usually go to bed burdened with anxiety, fear, anger, or frustration, these end up becoming the molds with which the subconscious shapes the following day. There is something profoundly mysterious about this. Hill said that the subconscious, when properly activated before sleep, acts as if it has access to pathways the conscious mind cannot see. He believed that the mind, on falling asleep, tunes into ideas, solutions, and perceptions that were invisible during the day. How many times have you gone to sleep with a problem and woken up with an unexpected idea? How many times has the answer appeared in the morning as if it had placed in your mind during the night? Hill called this infinite intelligence working silently. But this intelligence only operates when it finds fertile ground. A mind tormented by destructive thoughts blocks this flow. Conversely, a mind that falls asleep with clarity, purpose, and intention creates a kind of open channel for the subconscious to act. This is why Hill said that the minute before sleep can decide more about a person's life than hours of conscious effort. Now imagine for a moment what would happen if you changed just this, the way you lie down. Imagine if, instead of carrying the weight of the day, you delivered to your subconscious a clear image of the life you want. Not a distant fantasy, but a concrete fragment. You solving a problem. You achieving a goal. You being recognized. You living with dignity and balance. Imagine the impact of this repeated night after night. Hill said that the human mind is stubborn, but it is also trainable, and what it repeats with emotion ends up becoming its absolute truth. Perhaps this is where the most unexpected turning point occurs, the moment you realize you've always had this power, but never knew how to use it. Hill believed that the average man lives like a sleeping giant, and that the secret is not to awaken this giant all at once, but to wake him up for 1 minute each night, always before going to sleep. Always at the instant when the world stops and the mind begins its work. And this is where the inevitable question arises, almost whispered by your own conscience. What instruction have you been giving your subconscious? And even more importantly, what would happen if you finally gave it the right instruction? The answer, according to Hill, lies not in tomorrow, but in the next minute before falling asleep. Because it is there, exactly there, that everything begins to transform. Underscore Napoleon Hill always maintained that true transformation doesn't begin when you decide to change your life, but when you decide to change the quality of the thoughts you deliver to your subconscious. He said that the problem for most people isn't a lack of strength, intelligence, or opportunity, but rather the inability to recognize the mind operates like a magnetic field that attracts experiences compatible with their emotional vibration. For Hill, this wasn't it was psychological mechanics. He studied men who overcame extreme poverty, devastating losses, and hostile environments, and they all had something in common. Before changing their circumstances, they changed the emotional content they delivered to their minds before sleeping. This truth is uncomfortable because it shifts the responsibility inward, where few dare to look. He believed that the human mind functions like a corridor of doors that open according to the emotional state you carry as you walk through it. Sleeping with insecurity opens doors linked to insecurity. Sleeping with anger opens doors to anger. Sleeping with purpose opens doors linked to purpose. The subconscious chooses paths you are unaware of, but always based on the emotional seed you planted the night before. Hill said that there is no psychological neutrality. Either you program your mind or you become a victim of the invisible programming it receives without control. And it is precisely this lack of awareness that imprisons so many people in repetitive cycles, as if they were trapped in a destiny that they themselves reinforce daily. The big issue is that almost no one realizes they are reinforcing these patterns. They don't realize that by going to bed reliving a failure, they are repeating an instruction. They don't realize that by imagining the worst-case scenario for tomorrow, they are planting fear. They don't realize that by carrying accumulated resentments to bed, they are asking their subconscious to keep these situations alive in their. This explains why, even when they desire change, they feel a counterforce that seems to pull them back. Hill said that this force is the sum of all the internal commands deposited in the subconscious ears. But how to break this cycle if the mind seems so rooted in automatic emotional? And what if, without realizing it, you are repeating exactly what you most want to? Hill believed the answer begins with awareness. It's impossible to redirect the mind without first noticing what it's doing. Compared this to observing your own reflection in a mirror for the first time. Unsettling, but necessary. When you begin to realize what you're really thinking before sleep, you discover that many emotions that seemed inevitable are, in fact, unconscious choices. You discover that you're not condemned to sleep carrying. And when this becomes clear, a new feeling arises, a kind of silent freedom, as if you've found a hidden door within yourself. but awareness alone doesn't solve everything. Hill insisted that it's necessary to replace old patterns with new ones consistently on a daily basis. He said that the subconscious doesn't respond to superficial commands, but rather to emotional repetition. It's like teaching a child. It's no use speaking once and expecting them to learn. You need to insist, repeat, reinforce. The subconscious needs to feel the new emotion repeatedly until it replaces the old one. This replacement doesn't happen linearly. There are nights when you try to visualize something positive and your mind resists. There are nights when fear seems stronger. There are nights when frustration tries to take over again. And it is precisely in these moments that the ritual becomes valuable, because that's where the real training begins. The mind resists the new not because it is difficult, but because it is unknown. Hill said that the subconscious likes what it recognizes, even if it brings it pain. It prefers the safety of repetition to the risk of change. This is why so many people revert to old emotional patterns so easily. Not because they don't want to change, because the subconscious fights to preserve what it knows. And then, the inevitable question arises. Mind prefers the familiar to the healthy. How do you guide it down a new path without waging an internal war that you already know you will lose? According to Hill, the secret is not to force the mind, but guide it. He said that the subconscious is like a wild horse. If pulled, it despairs. If guided, it learns. That's why the practice before sleep is so powerful. It doesn't create change through force, through gentleness, soft repetition, through the gradual construction, a new emotional atmosphere. Visualizing, not just seeing, feeling. And when the positive emotion becomes a little stronger than the negative emotion, the subconscious begins to open up, as if recognizing in that feeling a safer alternative. And it is at this point that something unexpected happens. Instead of waking up defeated, you begin to wake up with small sparks of motivation that you can't explain. Instead of reacting automatically to problems, you begin to feel a strange calm, as if you were 2 steps ahead of the chaos. Instead of feeling intimidated by challenges, you realize that your mind begins to paths. This is no coincidence. Hill said that when the subconscious changes its emotional basis, it also changes its perceptions. And the way you perceive the world profoundly alters the way you live in it. Few people understand this because they are used to thinking that change comes from great. But Hill insisted that great transformations begin in the silent thoughts that no one sees. It's ironic, almost sarcastic, to realize that what seems too small to make a difference is precisely what most shapes the future. And if this is true, doesn't it also become true that many failures could have been avoided if the person had simply paid attention to what they thought before going to sleep? How many lives would have been different if someone had told them that night is not an ending, but a beginning? And this is where the most unsettling revelation of this part emerges. You are not just reacting to the world. You are reacting to what you yourself have created emotionally. That scares you, it also liberates you. Because if you are the creator, you create. You program destructive patterns, program new ones. If you gave your subconscious instructions that hurt you, give it instructions that heal you. Hill said that nothing is more transformative than realizing that the greatest obstacle and the greatest solution are in the same place, within you. And so, the question that defines this stage of the journey emerges as an inevitable echo. Everything you feel before sleep shapes your tomorrow. What kind of tomorrow are you really building? And most importantly, are you ready to change the seed you plant every night? Napoleon Hill believed that the human mind has such deep layers that most people go through life without even scratching the surface of their own potential. He said that there is a kind of secret laboratory, a point in consciousness where ideas, intuitions, and decisions are born even before they reach rational thought. And it is in this laboratory that subconscious works during the night. For Hill, understanding this was not just a philosophical question, it was a practical, almost scientific one. He argued that when we direct the subconscious before sleeping, we activate processes that defy common explanations. In his writings, Hill recorded cases so improbable that they would be dismissed as coincidence were it not for the repetition of these phenomena over decades of research. Among these cases, there is one that Hill always mentioned as proof of the power of the mind programmed at night. An American inventor, unknown to the general public, was trying to solve a technical problem that would put an end to his work. For weeks, he tried all logical solutions. Nothing worked. Exhausted, he remembered Hill's teachings and decided to entrust the problem to his subconscious before sleeping, concentrating on the sensation of the solution, even without knowing what it was. The next morning, he woke up with a clear image in his mind, a rotating piece with a different angle than the original. He immediately drew it. Upon testing, he realized that the improvised solution worked. The invention saved his job and increased his production by 37%. Hill claimed that this type of insight was not by chance, but a direct manifestation of the subconscious working during sleep. This story seems extraordinary, but anyone who has ever woken up with an unexpected idea knows what Hill meant. It happens to musicians who dream melodies, to writers who dream dialogues, to scientists who dream formulas. Albert Einstein, for example, mentioned that many of his insights began with mental images. Salvador Dali, known for surrealism, used techniques to partially fall asleep and capture visions created by the subconscious. Thomas Edison did the same. He would doze off holding metal spheres in his hand. When his body relaxed and he let the spheres fall, the noise would wake him at the exact moment creative ideas arose. Interestingly, Hill studied Edison personally and wrote that he did not consider these instances simple creativity, but as responses of the mind working beyond conscious limits. If great minds use the subconscious before sleep to achieve extraordinary results, why do so many ignore this mechanism? Hill believed the problem is that most people associate sleep only with physical rest, not deep mental activity. They see the night as an ending, when they should see it as a... He said that people spend the day trying to control results with physical effort, when they could multiply that effort programming their minds to work in the silence of the early morning. This view seems almost poetic, but Hill defended it seriously. The subconscious never sleeps, and there's a curious fact that reinforces this idea. Modern studies show that during sleep, the brain reorganizes information, creates new connections, strengthens memories, and simulates possibilities. This means that, even without realizing it, the brain is doing exactly what Hill described decades before science confirmed it. The subconscious is an active machine, constantly filtering, reorganizing, and producing emotional patterns that influence your choices. When someone sleeps nurturing fear, this machine builds pathways that reinforce that fear. When someone sleeps nurturing purpose, it builds pathways that reinforce that purpose. The difference between the two experiences may seem subtle, but it completely changes how a person sees the world upon waking. But perhaps the most impressive thing is the improbable events that arise when someone, for the first time, decides to take charge of this process. Hill recounted the story of a woman who learned to use the nightly ritual to change her financial life. She didn't visualize wealth, she simply focused every night on the feeling of dignity, security, and belonging. In a short time, she received an unexpected job offer from someone she hadn't seen in years. It seemed like a coincidence, but Hill said that true coincidence when nothing happened. When the mind is still, life is still. When the mind moves, life. The job offer didn't fall from the sky. It was attracted by profound emotional changes that adjusted her posture, energy, behaviors, and even her perception of herself. Small details that added up until external reality reorganized itself. Another example comes from a businessman Hill mentored for months. He was on the verge of bankruptcy, lacking new ideas and burdened with accumulated debt. Hill asked him to dedicate every night before sleep to visualizing only one feeling: clarity. Not a solution, not a sum of money, just clarity. 10 days later, while reviewing simple tasks, the man had what he called a flash of insight. He realized he was spending too much energy on bad projects and neglecting the one that had always yielded results. By reorganizing his focus, his company not only recovered, but grew. For Hill, this type of phenomenon wasn't a miracle, it was alignment. He said that when the mind knows what to look for, it finds it. Here arises the central question of this section. Solutions, opportunities, and insights are within your reach, but remain invisible simply because your mind hasn't received clear instruction before going to sleep. If Edison, Dali, Einstein, and so many other extraordinary people use this principle, what prevents an ordinary person from using it as well? Hill believed the answer lies in habit. Most people go to sleep carrying emotional weight, and the obedient mind works with this heavy material all night long. When the person wakes up, they are already tired, not because they slept little, but because they slept poorly emotionally. And then comes the most powerful point. Anyone can start today. Doesn't matter the age, financial situation, past, or the beliefs. The subconscious doesn't distinguish who deserves it or not. It simply obeys. The night will always be a construction site. You will always be the architect responsible for deciding what will be built there. If this seems too simple to be real, Hill would say that it is precisely this simplicity that makes this secret inaccessible to so many. The world seeks complexity. The subconscious seeks clarity. Now, perhaps more than ever, you can feel the weight of this discovery. Night is not rest, it's creation, not an end. It is a beginning. It is not silence, it is the making of destiny. And if all this is true, the inevitable question arises: what has your mind been building while asleep? And, more importantly, are you ready to take command of the construction? Napoleon Hill said that there is a point at which the subconscious mind stops merely obeying and begins to influence the body itself. Mood, posture, tone of voice, and even the decisions one makes unconsciously. He believed that most people live dominated by automatic patterns created precisely in the moments when they believe they are resting. It's ironic to think that the mind works more deeply while the body relaxes. Hill asserted that it is in this silent state that fears take root, insecurities strengthen, and negative beliefs become internal truths, even without having been consciously questioned. This idea may seem frightening, but it is also liberating because it reveals that the same mechanism that destroys can rebuild. Hill reminded us that the greatest tragedy is not failure. The fact that a person doesn't realize they are authorizing failure every night with thoughts they have accepted as inevitable. He said that some people fall asleep believing that tomorrow will be the same as today, and because of this, they live a life that repeats itself like a rigid pattern, incapable of expanding. But there is also that small group that transforms the night into fertile ground, guiding the subconscious to where it wants to go. The difference between the two groups is not in intellectual capacity, but in the awareness of what happens in the minutes before sleep. For Hill, whoever masters this moment masters their own, and it is at this point that attention arises that many ignore. The stronger the negative emotion carried to bed, the more deeply it settles. Hill explained that feelings such as frustration, anger, helplessness, or worry have an intense emotional force that the subconscious absorbs without resistance. This creates a dangerous cycle. The person sleeps heavily, wakes up tired, lives reactively, ends the day stressed, and eats the process. Over time, this cycle creates a feeling of inflexible destiny, as if life were condemned to not change. But Hill asserted that this is not destiny. It is unsupervised programming. And if there is programming, there is also the possibility of reprogramming. The most powerful turning point comes when a person becomes aware that they can break this cycle. Hill said that just one night of clear intention is enough to weaken the old pattern, initiate an internal change. He told the story of a man who, after years of being consumed by feelings of failure, decided to try the nightly ritual, sheer desperation. He didn't truly believe in the method, but he had nothing left to lose. That night he tried to visualize a simple scene, himself entering a room with a firm posture, being listened to and respected. It was just a symbolic image, but charged with emotion. This man reported that he woke up the next day with a strange disposition he hadn't felt in months. And this disposition led him to make different decisions, however small, initiated a sequence of events that completely changed his reality. For Hill, that experience was living proof that small internal adjustments can trigger great external transformations. The inevitable question arises, why do such simple changes seem so impossible for most? Hill said that the human mind fears the unknown, even when the unknown is better than what it already knows. People become accustomed to pain because pain is predictable. The subconscious prefers familiar suffering to the possibility of change. And that is why so many try to alter their lives while continuing to slumber with the same set of harmful emotions. They want change without changing the seed. They want different fruits by planting the same roots. They want new results by feeding the mind with the same repeated thoughts. This is where the rhythm of the internal narrative begins to intensify. When someone decides to take command of the subconscious, resistance appears. The mind tries to bring back tries to recall failures, tries to remember old stories, prove that nothing will change. Hill said that this is the subconscious defending its territory, not because it wishes harm, but because it doesn't yet understand that there is a new direction. It is precisely at this moment that many give up. It is also at this moment that those who change persist. They overcome this resistance and continue planting new images before sleeping, until the subconscious finally accepts the change as true. And then, something almost imperceptible, yet powerful, happens. The person begins to notice small coincidences, small signs, small impulses that lead them to act differently, unexpected conversations, ideas that arise at unusual, intuitions that seem to come from nowhere. Hill said that this is not magic, it's synchronization. When the subconscious changes its emotional base, it also changes what you believe in the world. It highlights opportunities that previously seemed invisible. It organizes thoughts that were previously chaotic. It filters information more intelligently. Life doesn't change immediately. You change. And as you change, everything around you slowly begins to respond. But the most tense part comes now. Hill said there's a critical point in the process, the moment when the old mind tries to return with full force. This usually happens when a person begins to see the first signs of change. The subconscious, still insecure, tries to reestablish the old pattern, as if it were afraid of the new. It is at this moment that many return to the previous cycle. But those who remain, even in the face of this emotion, cross the barrier and reach the point where the change finally solidifies. And it is precisely here that the final revelation approaches, that each night is a fork in the road. You either sleep creating or you sleep repeating. There is no middle ground. And when this truth is finally understood, the person realizes that they were never bound to destiny, They were bound to emotional habit. Now comes the question that leads directly to the final part. If you knew that the change you have always sought is hidden in the minute before you fall asleep, would you treat that minute as you have until now? Or would you use that moment to build something entirely new? Napoleon Hill always believed that there is a moment when truth ceases to be theory and becomes a choice. This is the point where you not only understand the power of the finally decide to use. Now, after everything you've heard, perhaps you realize that the change that seemed distant was much closer, that it wasn't in complex books, nor in secret methods, nor in rare opportunities. It was always in the minute before sleep, silent, forgotten, underestimated. It is in that minute that your story leans one way or the other. Hill said that this moment is the doorway between two worlds, the world you live in and the world you are destined to create. Even so, most people cross that doorway every day unconsciously, like someone passing by a light source without realizing they could. Now that you understand this mechanism, the question that arises is not what the subconscious does, but what you will do with this knowledge. Hill stated that transformation does not depend on infinite willpower, but on small rituals repeated with intention. And the most powerful of all is also the simplest, deciding which emotion, which image, and which direction to give to the mind before sleep. Not about creating unreal fantasies, but about establishing an internal state that allows the subconscious to work in your favor. A state of clarity, purpose, dignity, and vision. He said that the mind does not respond to vague desires, but well-defined emotional commands. You can start with something small. Choose an image that represents the version of yourself you want to build. It doesn't have to be grand, just true. It could be you making the right decision, finishing something you've put off for a long time, treating someone more calmly, organizing your finances, walking through a door that previously intimidated you. The key is to feel the version you're imagining. Don't analyze, don't judge, don't doubt. Just feel. Hill taught that emotion is the language the subconscious understands. Image without emotion is discarded. Felt image is planted. When you lie down, turn off noises, lights, and distractions. Breathe slowly and deeply until you notice your mind beginning down. Don't fight negative thoughts. Let them pass like clouds. When you feel more present, bring forth your chosen image. See it as naturally as possible without forcing it, without trying to make it. Allow it to form, even in a simple way. And most importantly, try to feel the emotion that this image represents. This feeling is the seed. It is what will travel to your subconscious when you fall asleep. It is what will begin to reorganize internal patterns, dissolve blockages, create new perceptions, and open pathways. Perhaps the first few days will seem strange. Perhaps your mind will try to revert to old patterns. This doesn't mean failure, but simply that your mind is used to repeating the old emotional circuit. Keep going anyway. Hill said that consistency is the bridge between intention and manifestation. Over time, you will begin to notice small changes. You will wake up with more energy. You will see solutions where before there was only confusion. You will feel more courage. You will react differently to problems that previously ruined your day. Small signs will begin here, and it is precisely in these small signs the transformation first reveals itself. And when this process becomes natural, something even more significant, you begin to see yourself differently. You stop being a hostage to automatic emotion. You stop repeating patterns you inherited or learned unconsciously. You stop falling asleep like someone who merely survives and start falling asleep like someone who builds. Hill said that man becomes the sum of the thoughts he most consistently feeds on. And now you understand that this consistency doesn't happen throughout the entire, but mainly in the minutes when the conscious mind dissolves, subconscious takes over. It's important to remember that you don't need blind faith in the process for it to work. The subconscious doesn't demand belief, it demands repetition. It doesn't respond to pretty phrases. It responds to internal sensation. It doesn't change because you want it to change. It changes because you start providing it with new material to work with while it sleeps. And this material, however simple, can alter the entire course of your life. One image per night, 1 minute per day, one intention at a time. That's enough to start a silent revolution. Now, close your eyes for a moment and imagine something. Imagine yourself 6 months from now, a direct result of the small rituals you started today. Imagine a firmer posture, a clearer mind, a more organized life, a confidence that finally springs from within and not from external circumstances. Imagine decisions that once seemed impossible, now flowing naturally. Imagine waking up with purpose, burdens. Imagine realizing that this version is, in fact, you, just you. Without the noise the world has placed on your identity over the years. Hill would say that everything you've just imagined already exists, possibility in the invisible realm of the mind. What's lacking isn't capacity, it's continuity. The subconscious builds upon what it receives. The final question is simple. What will you give it today? Before I finish, I want to ask you something that Hill would ask if speaking to you now. Don't let this message die in theory. Start today. Start now. Start tonight. And if this video opened your eyes, touched you in some way, or awakened something within you, please like it, because that helps this message reach more people. Comment below, even anonymously, just saying, I will start today. If you're not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now. Here, you are never alone in the transformation. Today, you discovered what Hill said almost a century ago. Destiny begins with the last thought before sleep. Now, you are the one who chooses what that thought will be.